Let us begin today's discussion, or today's second discussion as such. To start with this session, what we will try to do is try to look at Hamilton's equations from a different viewpoint. Mane, write it in a different form or different notation. Basically, one can write Hamilton's equations in the form of a matrix. That is called the symplectic form of Hamilton's equations, or matrix form of Hamilton's equations. So let us try to write this. This has nothing to do with canonical transformation. It's just a general thing which we are introducing now because we need it. Okay. What are Hamilton's equations of motion? We know this very well. The equation of motion for the coordinates are like this: da by h by da by pk, and the equation for the momenta are like this: minus da by h by da by pk. This we are aware of. Now, when I write these two equations, it is not two equations. K has value for going from 1 to n. So basically, this is a collection of equations. Q1 is equal to da by h by da by p1. Q2 is equal to da by h by da by p2, etc. Similarly, the next set of equations is p1 is equal to minus da by h by da by q1. P2 is equal to minus da by h by da by q2, etc. Barabar hai, and there are n such equations in both the cases. So total number of equations is 2n. My mistake, all the terms on the left hand side are time derivatives, q dot, p dot, etc. I know you know it, but it was a mistake. Yeah. Now let me try to collectively represent all the coordinates and all the momenta together. I am going to call this as by the symbol eta. Okay. This is just my definition. This is a symbol eta which I am going to use for defining or basically naming all of them put together. I am not going to distinguish them. This is coordinate, this is momenta, all the dynamical variables of the system. Coordinates, momenta, all of them together. I am going to collectively call them as eta. Okay. Then of course qk dots and pk dots, all of them together will be called as eta dot, obviously. Now if you look at this entire set of 2n equations, basically what you have is on one side, if you list all of them together, you have got q1, q2 up to, let us say, qn, and in the same listing, let me list out the momenta also, p1, p2. This will be the list of objects which I call as eta collectively. That is what I have mentioned over here. Of course, therefore, if I have q1 dot, q2 dot up to qn dot, similarly p1 dot, p2 dot up to pn dot, then I can represent this as eta dot. Okay. And I know that these guys are related to whom? They are related to these guys. Da by h by da by q1, da by h by da by q2 up to da by h by da by qn, and similarly da by h by da by p1 da by h by da by p2 dot 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 da by h by da by pn. N, let us make it clear, n is capital N, not small n. I mean, it can be anything, just we are writing capital N. You can say that actually this guy is split into two halves. upper half contains the coordinates and lower half contains the momenta. Here also upper half contains derivative with respect to the coordinate, lower half contains derivative with respect to the momenta. If required, I can write this guy as something like daba h by daba eta. I can call it as daba h by daba eta, where eta goes from 1 to 2n. Eta 1 to eta n are the coordinates and eta n plus 1 to eta 2n are the momenta. So I can write it collectively in this manner. And basically what I have is that the upper guy is equal to plus 1 times the lower guy on the other side, and similarly the lower guy here is equal to minus 1 times the upper guy on the other side. Correct? Each of these q1 dot is equal to plus 1 into daba h by daba p1, q2 dot is plus 1 into daba h by daba p2 dot dot dot, qn dot is plus 1 into daba h by daba pn, then p1 dot is minus 1 times daba h by daba q1, p2 dot is minus 1 times daba h by daba q2 dot 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 dot, pn dot is equal to minus 1 times daba h by daba qn. So this upper and lower half of this collection are related to each other and they are cross related. The q part is related to the p part on the other side and vice versa. P part is related to the q part, and the mapping is 1 to 1. Means first guy from here is linked with first guy from here, second guy from here is linked with, and so on and so forth. Okay. And of course we know that instead of writing it in this complicated fashion by drawing a plus 1 and minus 1 kind of thing, we can also represent this in the matrix form. That is what we will do. What will this matrix look like which connects these two things? Just to have clarity, that matrix will also be divided into 4 parts. And what will be the entries of this matrix? Q1 dot has nothing to do with any of these guys. Daba h by daba Q1 to daba h by daba Qn. So this guy will be just zeros everywhere. Similarly, Q2 dot is also not related. Q1 dot, Q2 dot, etc. depend on the lower half, daba h by daba P. Daba h by daba Q part, they are simply 0. Similarly, Qn also doesn't depend on daba h by daba Q in any manner. And so basically this whole matrix is filled only with zeros. The top left part of this matrix is filled with zeros. That is because qk dot has nothing to do with daba h by daba qk. It is related to daba h by daba pk. Now when we come here, q1 dot is 0 times daba h by daba q1 plus 0 times daba h by daba q2 plus 0 times daba h by daba qn plus 1 times daba h by daba p1 plus 0 times daba h by daba p2 plus 0 times daba h, like that till n. Similarly, if you look at q2 dot, only when the entry corresponds with daba h by daba p2, it is equal to 1. Everywhere else it is 0. Similarly, if you go to the very last row, qn dot will be linked only with daba h by daba pn. So it will have 1 only in the final column. Everywhere else it will be 0. And so basically, and there will be ones along the diagonal, just for your reference. All the diagonal elements in this part of the matrix, diagonal mane along this diagonal of the sub matrix, this 1/4 matrix which you have, uska diagonal mein everyone will be 1. Okay. That is because q1 dot is plus daba h by daba p1. Similarly, if you go to the lower half of the matrix, what you will find is p1 dot is equal to 1 times minus 1 times daba h by daba q1 plus 0 times daba h by daba q2 dot 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 till daba h by daba qn everything is 0, and later on also everything is 0. The fourth part of the matrix, that is bottom right part, will be exactly like the first part, because This basically talks about linkage between rate of change of momentum and derivative of Hamiltonian with respect to momentum. They are not related to each other. P only depends on dabba h by dabba q, not on dabba h by dabba p. Hence, this whole submatrix, the fourth submatrix basically, is same as the first submatrix. It is also fulfilled with zeros. And this part, which we have not yet filled, as you can guess, it will have non-zero element only along the diagonals, and everywhere along the diagonal the entry will be -1. For example, Pn dot is -1 times dabba h by dabba qn. And there will be -1s all along the diagonal, just indicated a few of them so that it is clear. Okay. And this is a very elaborate and large matrix, and it is a sparse matrix. By sparse, we mean most of the entries are 0, very, very few entries are either 1 or -1. But it is a matrix. Okay. This particular matrix, at least in Goldstein's book, this matrix is called the J matrix for whatever reason. And basically, your Hamilton's equation therefore becomes eta dot is J matrix times dabba h by dabba eta. Eta dot and dabba h by dabba eta are column vectors. Eta dot is basically the column vector of q1, q2 up to qn, and then p1, p2, all of them put together. And dabba h by dabba eta is dabba h by dabba q1, dabba h by dabba q2, till dabba h by dabba qn, followed by dabba h by dabba p1, dabba h by dabba p2, till dabba h by dabba pn. It looks very complicated and elaborate, but in reality, this is straightforward. I mean, we are not going to actually physically write down this matrix every time. We don't need to, because the matrix is fairly straightforward. If you look at the J matrix, the definition of the J matrix is a 2n cross 2n matrix. And if you look at it, basically its definition is you have a null matrix, null square matrix n cross n. You have an identity matrix, you have a minus of identity matrix, and you have another null matrix. By identity matrix, we mean the matrix which has 1 on the diagonals and 0 everywhere else, and null matrix means it is 0 everywhere. Okay, so the J matrix can be thought of as a block matrix composed of 4 n cross n matrices, which are 0, I, minus I, and 0. I meaning your identity matrix. Okay. This is the definition of the J matrix. And in terms of the J matrix, my Hamilton's equation of motion can be written as a matrix equation, where I have the column vector of the rate of change of the variables, and another column vector which has the derivative of Hamiltonian with respect to the variables. And they are linked to each other via this J matrix. This is the basic idea which we are trying to put forward here. Okay. All right. If there are doubts later on, you can ask as well, no problem. But basically, this is just a mathematically fancy way of writing something which we already knew. There is nothing great about it. And basically, our next aim would be to use this format somewhere, but we will come to that in a moment. Okay. Right now, this is just one piece of the puzzle which we have collected, namely how to write Hamilton's equations in matrix form. Hamilton's equation in matrix form can be written as eta dot is J matrix times dabba h by dabba eta. Square brackets in this particular formalism indicates matrices. Okay. All quantities in square brackets are matrices. That is how we are indicating matrices. Okay. These are basically Hamilton's equations in matrix form. All right, if this is clear, then let us move further. This is, as I said, one piece of the puzzle. Let us try to see another piece of the puzzle, which we are trying to assemble today. The second piece which we are going to look at is a set of conditions for a transformation to be canonical. Basically, if you remember, our definition of canonical transformation is a transformation of the old dynamical variables p, small p and small q to a new set of dynamical variables capital P and capital Q, such that we know that the old set of variables satisfies Hamilton's equations, but the new set of variables should also satisfy Hamilton's equations with the new Hamiltonian. This is our understanding. Barabar hai? This is what we basically our definition of canonical transformation is if Qk, Pk and H are satisfying the Hamilton equations of motion. If we do a canonical transformation, then the new variables capital Qk, capital Pk and the new Hamiltonian K will also satisfy the Hamilton equations of motion. This is our basic premise or definition of what we mean by canonical transformation. And why we are so specific? Because any transformation of Q and P need not necessarily be a canonical transformation. In order for it to be a canonical transformation, it has to satisfy this criteria that both old variables and new variables will satisfy Hamilton's equations of motion for their respective Hamiltonians. We also know that the Hamiltonians H and K only differ in case of time dependent changes. If there is no time dependence, then basically H and K are the same. That is another thing which we have established last time while discussing the generating function kind of formalism. Okay. So let us try to put this particular idea into better perspective, and we will do it in the following manner. Consider the expression Qk dot. What will be Qk dot? How will you expand Qk dot? If you treat Qk as a function of capital Qk and capital Pk, which is what the canonical transformation is about, then basically Qk dot will become daba Qk by daba capital Qk into capital Qk dot plus daba Qk by daba capital Pk dot. Is this okay?
Yes, sir.
This is in terms of the new variables, basically. I'm just labeling the branch so that we are clear. And what are Qk dot and Pk dot? If the transformation is canonical, this should be, by transformation is canonical, what we mean? Qk dot and Pk dot will satisfy Hamilton's equations of motion. Okay? If that is true, then basically in terms of the new Hamilton's equations of motion. I am going to call K also as H only, because there is no time dependence in the problem. So we are going to call K as H only, non-time dependent Hamiltonian we are considering. Then non-time dependent transformation as well. Then basically what will happen to this? This will become daba qk by daba capital Qk. What is Qk dot? Capital Qk dot? It is plus daba h by daba pk. And similarly, the second term will contain the term daba qk by daba capital Qk, which was already there. And you have to replace pk dot as minus daba h by daba capital Qk. So you obtain this expression for Qk dot. However, you can also try it directly in terms of the old variables itself. What is Qk dot in terms of Hamilton's equations of motion? It will just be daba h by daba pk. But what is daba h by daba pk?
Qk dot.
No, वो तो है Qk dot, that is on the left. But you can expand this in terms of pk as a function of qk and small qk and small pk. So basically it will be, let me make a small correction here. Let me call this as qi. That's the only correction. The reason is that otherwise your summation over indices doesn't make sense. Everywhere there is a summation over k, just for your reference, because since we have not introduced the summation convention anywhere explicitly, let us not go into that. Basically, this will become daba h by daba pi, which is summation over k daba h by daba pk into daba pk by daba pi. Sorry, daba. Please keep track of capital and small. Daba capital pi plus daba h by daba qk into daba qk by capital pi. Basic उल्टा हो गया ना? This should be small pi, so this will be small pi and this will be the capital. Now we are fine. Please keep track of capital and small. Don't lose track of it like I just did. All right. Basically, what we are saying is that if we treat Qk and Pk as functions of capital Qk and capital Pk, which is what the canonical transformation is all about, then basically I end up getting two different expressions for the same object. What is the object? Qi dot. I find that Qi dot can either be written as daba Qi by daba Qk times daba h by daba Pk minus daba Qi by daba Pk into daba h by daba Qk. This is one part. Or it can be written as daba h by daba Qk into daba Qk by daba Pi plus daba h by daba Pk by daba Pi, where daba h by daba capital Pk, daba capital Pk by daba small pi, that kind of thing. Okay? Both these expressions belong to the same guy. It is Qi dot. And basically in one place I have used the old Hamilton's equations, and one place I have used the new Hamilton's equations. So basically, implicitly, I am trusting that both the old and new variables are satisfying Hamilton's equations. Therefore, I have already assumed here that the transformation between small q small p to Q capital P is a canonical transformation. But that is possible only if both of these curly brackets are equal to each other. That is the idea. If these two curly brackets are equal to each other, then what comment can you make? Basically, you have got two terms which are basically multiplying daba h by daba qk. One is this guy and one is this guy. Similarly, there are two terms which are multiplying daba h by daba pk. I'm going to put them in squares instead of circles so that it is clear. One is this guy and one is this guy. You can see that the summation is the same and the terms which are not circled or put inside a box, they are the same. Correct? Daba h by daba pk, daba h by daba k. Both are multiplied by some object in a square box, but those two objects are different from each other. Similarly, daba h by daba capital Qk and daba h by daba capital Qk, both are multiplied by some object which is in a round box, but they are different from each other. Clearly seen? Yes, no?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So basically, the two objects inside the circles should be equal to each other and the two objects inside the squares should be equal to each other. That is the conclusion which we come to. And therefore, let me put this definition in a separate box, otherwise it will get mixed. Therefore, we arrive at a set of conditions for a canonical transformation. Means basically, if the transformation is canonical, then these conditions have to be satisfied. What are the conditions? First condition is daba qk by daba pi will be equal to minus daba small qi by daba capital pk, and daba qi by daba capital qk is equal to plus daba capital pk by daba small p. So this gives two relations between the old and new coordinates. So this is different from what we had done earlier. Earlier we said that I will take the action principle and then I will construct this thing and I have this arbitrary function f, and using that we have generated the canonical transformations. This is a different viewpoint, or not viewpoint, this is a different approach where we basically say that if someone comes and tells me, boss, this is my original system, it has coordinates small q, small p, and I want to use these coordinates because they look convenient to me, because like one of them is simplifying the things or something like that. So I want to use capital Q, capital P. Then he asks you the question, is this allowed? And it may not always be possible for you to sit and figure out what will be the generating function which takes you from here to here. In the simple harmonic oscillator problem which we saw in the example last time, in that we were able to figure out, fortunately, what is the generating function. But suppose you are not able to figure out the generating function, these two sets of equations basically gives you the criteria for comparing small q and capital Q. If they satisfy these conditions, some of these conditions, then you can be comfortable that yes, boss seems to be okay, that we can try to use this as the basis for our discussion. Okay? So basically we have two equations here, and this is not the complete story. You can get two more equations by considering what is pi dot, and we can quickly run through the whole thing here. If you treat Pi as a function of Qk and Pk basically this is the approach where you start with the new guys. Then summation over K daba Pi by daba capital Qk dot plus daba Pi by daba capital Pk dot. This in turn, if you substitute the new Hamilton's equations, by new you mean the equation for capital Qk dot and capital Pk dot. This is basically summation daba Pi by daba capital Qk times daba H by daba capital Pk, and the other one is minus daba Pi by daba capital Pk into daba H by daba capital Qk. This is one part. The same guy, if you treat him from the perspective of the old variables, where at some stage you will have to use the fact that Qk is a function of Qk and Pk. You can watch this carefully. This becomes minus daba H by daba Qi. This is from the old Hamilton's equation. You will find that this is equal to summation over K. Daba H by daba Qi can be written simply as minus daba H by daba capital Qk times capital Qk by daba small Qi. The minus is carried through from outside. There is a minus because of the original Hamilton's equation that carries through, minus daba H by daba capital Pk times daba capital Pk by daba small Qi. Once again, if you try to group the terms together, you will find that daba H by daba Pk has this guy and this guy, and daba H by daba Qk has this guy and this guy, and therefore they should be equal to each other. Please take very good care of the minus signs. The minus signs have not been included in the circling part, but basically you get two more conditions for a transformation to be canonical. What are they? Basically, daba Pi by daba capital Qk is minus daba capital Pk by daba small Qi, and daba capital Qk by daba small Qi is equal to, there is a minus on both the sides, so that cancels, daba small Pi by daba capital Pk. So you get this set of four equations, which under any situation, if you know one of the guys as functions of the others, you can find the others, basically. That is the purpose which this serve in the immediate context. Basically, if you have a transformation from capital Q to capital P, then you can try to substitute capital Q, capital P, small p inside this equation, and if it works, then you can say that the transition from small q to capital Q capital P is a canonical transformation. Otherwise, you say that it is not canonical, which means that the new variables and the new Hamiltonian will not satisfy Hamilton's equations if any of these conditions is violated for a particular choice of small p here and capital Q capital P here. When you put them all together into this, you should find that all these equalities should be satisfied. Okay. Quick way to remember this is that if one side is old in the numerator and new in the denominator, other side will be new in the numerator and old in the denominator. That is the first point. Second point is if you have derivative of same type of quantity, then you have a plus sign. If you have derivative of the opposite type of quantity, mane daba capital Q by daba small p, or daba capital P by daba small q, then you get a minus sign. If it is derivative of P with respect to P or Q with respect to Q, you don't get a minus. Okay. Just a idea, just a way of looking at it that that makes it easy to remember this. Okay. So basically what you have arrived at over here are a set of conditions on the small q, small p and capital Q, capital P combinations. If these conditions are satisfied, then you can happily use Hamilton's equations in terms of the new variables. Otherwise, in general, you are not sure when you replace small q, small p in terms of some function capital Q, capital P. You are not absolutely sure that the new variables will satisfy Hamilton's equation. This is what will make you sure about that. So these equations can be used in variety of ways, which we'll try to come across few of them during the tutorial session. Okay, but right now we are using this, as I said, just as a piece of the puzzle. First piece of the puzzle was I can write Hamilton's equations in matrix form. First one. Second is there are a certain set of differential conditions between old QP and new QP such that when they are satisfied, the transformation can be called as canonical. Now we'll try to combine all of these things together in one single framework, and we will therefore obtain a condition on the transformation properties of small q, small p and capital Q, capital P, which can be used easily to determine whether or not that particular transformation is a canonical transformation or not. And if it is a canonical transformation, it can be used in various ways. Okay. Is this part okay? Is there any question at this stage? Okay. So this is the second piece of the puzzle which we have. First was that the Hamilton's equation can be expressed in matrix form. Second is this guy. In fact, if we can try to extend this thought a little bit, we can try to think of this in a slightly different way. Okay. We'll come to this in a moment. Okay. And we'll try to write down these conditions in a more compact form. So we'll come to that. Okay. Just now, let us move forward. The next step which we want to establish is obtain a matrix condition we already obtained a differential condition set of 4 conditions for the transformation to be canonical. Now we can try to work that into the matrix formula. Basically, we are combining the 2 parts of the puzzle which we have collected till now. Because this particular thing will make our life much easier. Okay. Basically, let me represent my old set of variables, which is Q and P together. We have already said that we will represent this by the letter eta. Similarly, the new set of variables, capital Q, capital P, Goldstein uses some kind of weird symbol which I can't copy, so I will simply use lambda. Okay, if you're reading Goldstein, I think he uses something like this, which is like really cumbersome to write on the board. So we will use a much simpler symbol lambda. And since lambdas are functions of the etas, which is to say that capital Q, capital P are functions of small q, small p, basically we can write down in a simple manner. If I have lambda k, then the time derivative of lambda k will be summation over I daba lambda k by daba eta I dot. Basically, this is a one single equation which actually gives you the following information. What this means is basically qk dot is summation over I daba qk by daba qi dot plus daba qk by daba pi dot, and capital Pk dot is summation daba pk by daba qi dot plus daba pk by daba pi dot. All these things we can write compactly in the following form as lambda k dot is equal to summation over I daba lambda k by daba eta I times eta I dot. Okay. Now I can easily look at this and say that, but lambda k dot I can also write as a column vector, basically lambda dot, and this will be equal to some matrix M times the column vector eta dot. Now what is this M guy? Basically the M is a matrix such that the kth row and ith column will contain this guy. So basically the M matrix, if you are particular, will basically be something like daba q1 by daba q1, daba q1 by daba q2, daba q1 by daba qn, like that till daba q by daba pn. Similarly, till at the end it will have daba pn by daba q1, daba pn by daba q2, up to daba pn by daba small pn. It is this kind of matrix, the matrix of the derivatives. This is often called the Jacobian matrix of the system. The Jacobian matrix basically gives the partial derivatives of the new set of coordinates with respect to the old set of coordinates arranged in a matrix. Okay. It's a very standard construct in mathematical physics, but right now we are not going to worry about its properties. So this is just for reference. We are not going to use the inherent definition of the Jacobian matrix anywhere anytime soon. Okay. We just need to know that it can be represented as a matrix which will have these entries. That's all. Okay. So once you have written this in terms of the Jacobian matrix, now these are the old variables. I can always write this in terms of the old set of Lagrange equations, what will it become? Now recollect, just a few minutes back we have used a matrix method to write down Hamilton's equation. What was that? Basically, eta dot will become the J matrix times dabba H by dabba eta. This is the this is basically substituting the Hamilton's equation in matrix form. Eta dot can be written as the eta dot column vector can be written as the square matrix J multiplied by the column vector dabba H by dabba eta. Is this okay? Is this correct? We have just substituted, nothing more. Only because it is in matrix form, it looks a little strange, but otherwise this is quite straightforward. Okay? Fine, yes, no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Now, let us examine this guy carefully. What is dabba H by dabba eta? Basically, it is a column vector whose individual entry one can write as dabba H by dabba eta I. But what is dabba H by dabba eta I? We can write this as summation over K agreed. Let me write the summation over a different letter. Let me call it J. Just expansion in terms of partial derivatives. बराबर है? Which I can rewrite in a very subtle manner, same thing, but let me write dabba lambda J by dabba eta I first, followed by dabba H by dabba lambda J. Looks like we have just interchanged the two terms. The Hamiltonian term comes later and the partial derivative, the dabba lambda J by dabba eta I comes earlier. Okay? Is this okay? Is this fine? Yes, no?
Yes, sir.
Now let us try to look at this a bit more under microscope, kind of, little more carefully. Basically, this is a column vector dabba H by dabba eta. If you combine all of them together, okay? And that is equal to, basically, I can represent dabba H by dabba lambda also as a column vector. Correct? And what is this guy, dabba lambda by dabba eta? Will it be the same as the Jacobian matrix?
Yes, sir.
Everyone, how many of you agree? Please raise your hand that this would be the Jacobian matrix. I have to get this. This guy is here. This guy is here. I have to get this guy here. How many of you feel that that will be the same as the Jacobian matrix? Let us say, see a few hands at least. Don't lower your hands till we get a chance to count. Only a few of them are convinced. The others, if they have doubt, they can ask. All right. I can see quite a few hands. I am assuming the rest of them are just shy to raise the hand. Okay, you can put your hands down. Okay. Thank you. So basically, the point is, everyone is convinced that this should be the Jacobian matrix. Barabar hai? Basically, it is a matrix whose entries are dabba lambda by dabba eta. Everyone agrees? Yes, no?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Now let us
Sir,
try to look at.
sir,
Bolo.
just one question.
Bolo.
How will you convert this equation into direct matrix form? I don't.
Write it explicitly. Ne? What is summation over j? J goes from 1 to 2n. So basically, just for, let us say, daba h by daba q3, I am expanding for. Then this will be daba h by daba, lambdas are capital Qs. Huh? Daba x by daba q1 into daba q1 by daba small q3 plus daba h by daba capital Q2 into daba q2 by daba q3 and so on. Barabar hai? This is okay, na?
Oh yeah, sir.
Now what you do next is that if you change these 3 to 5, then what will change? Only these guys are going to change. Na? Now, good that you raised this point. Now, if you look at the original Jacobian matrix, basically for daba h by daba q3, everywhere you will have q3, q3, q3 only, na? Ending with daba h by daba pn into daba pn by daba q3. Agreed? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Now, very interesting point, and which will help us to determine whether this should be correct or not. What are the entries in this? So basically, I can write daba h by daba q3 is equal to a row vector times a column vector. The column vector is daba h by daba capital Q1 up to daba h by daba capital Pn. What is the row vector which I am multiplying with? Daba q1 by daba q3, daba q2 by daba q3, dot, daba pn by daba. This makes sense as the matrix form of this equation.
Yes, sir.
Just multiply all the terms and you will get it, correct?
Right.
Now, very important, look at the rows in the Jacobian matrix which we have written. Is the numerator is common for the row or the denominator is common?
Numerator.
And in the whatever we have just now written the row vector, what is common?
Denominator.
So this actually is not the Jacobian matrix, it is actually transpose of the Jacobian matrix, means interchange of row and column. Okay. That was the point which I was trying to make, but thank you for asking the question and allowing me to make it so explicitly. Okay. That the matrix which you have here will be the transpose of the Jacobian matrix. How to know this without writing down all these big things? Basically, the column vector here has lambda j, na? So this has rows labeled by j. So this will have columns labeled by j. Otherwise, the number of rows of this guy and number of columns of this guy will not match. Or ulta, number of columns of this guy and number of rows of this guy will not match. So basically, j should be the label for the columns of this matrix. Whereas in the original Jacobian matrix, k or the coefficient of lambda is basically the row coefficient, whereas here j is the column coefficient because the next guy has j number of rows. It's a column vector, and therefore this will be the transpose of the original matrix. Those who did not follow that, Haji, boliye.
Repeat once again.
Basically, how to find out without writing down the explicit matrix form whether this is the original matrix or the transpose matrix. This is the question. Is that okay? That is the question we are trying to answer. Now, how to identify is basically, first of all, ask the question, what is this guy, the last guy? That guy is a column vector because left hand side has one column vector, right hand side has one column vector, and there is a square matrix here. Okay? This guy is a column vector, agreed?
No, I don't.
Well, if this guy is a column vector, then this guy has to be a column vector. Otherwise, the matrix equation doesn't make sense.
Okay, but this guy, why this guy is column vector?
Because we started our whole game from there, na? Eta dot and lambda dot are column vectors, and then eta dot I wrote as J matrix times dabba h by dabba eta, which is also a column vector. The way we had written down 3 pages back. Okay?
Yes, sir.
You can do the whole thing with row vectors. The algebra doesn't change. See, the reason we write column vectors is because column vectors can fit in one page, row vectors will not fit in one page. There will be a lot of empty space up and down. That is the only reason we don't do algebra in terms of row vectors. It's a practical thing. Mathematically, they are both equivalent, but we are saying that it's a column vector. Okay? That is our starting point. Therefore, this guy is also a column vector. With me so far? Is it okay? Yes?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
And this is a square matrix. Now, my question is, this square matrix multiplied by this column vector, how to know which means whether the rows will multiply or the columns will multiply? This is a column vector. So, J is the label for the rows of the column vector because a column vector will have n number of rows and only one column. Okay? So,
J
this is
the
basically
label for, sir. J is the
row,
label
row.
row, number of rows.
Yeah, row 1, row 2. So jth row, J means jth row, entry in the jth row. When I say dabba h by dabba lambda j, I mean look at the jth row of this column vector. It is the row label. Therefore, if j is the row label for this guy, then here j has to be the label of the column. Because square matrix multiplied by column vector may the number of columns of this guy has to match with number of rows of this guy. That is basic matrix multiplication rule. Otherwise, you can't do matrix multiplication. Is this okay?
Okay, sir.
Once you have established that, that means J is the column label for this guy. Ne?
Now we know that this dabba lambda j upon dabba eta is a row matrix. That's why this lambda j is labeling for column number of.
No,
columns.
it is not a row matrix. It's a square matrix. In this case, which we have written down specifically, yes, it's a single row, but basically you will have dabba h by dabba q1 to qn, all of them will be there na, at some stage.
Right.
So all those rows will come and this will become a square matrix.
Okay.
But basically the point is that you should check up where the indices are matching. So this index j is there here and it is also there here. Then this is the contracted index as it is called in matrix algebra. And therefore, basically if this is the row label, then this has to be the column label. And when you look at the original Jacobian matrix, the index of lambda is what? It is the row label. It is the first one. Ne? Kth row, ith column. So I need a matrix which has entries which are dabba lambda by dabba eta, but the index of lambda should be the column label, not the row label. Here the index of lambda is the row label. If I transpose this, I will get mik for the transpose matrix is equal to dabba lambda k by dabba eta I, and there k will be the column label. So this is basically the transpose matrix, not the original matrix. If you are not convinced about this, take a simple case with just 2 coordinates and 2 momenta. And of course 2 capital coordinates and 2 capital momenta. And it will get a 4 cross 4 matrix. Try to figure out this part without all the dots. Try to do it simply and you will get it. Okay. I think enough time we have given for this, and I am sure you have enough inputs to now go and convince yourself about this. I agree with you that it is quite confusing. It is not very straightforward, but the confusion is more of familiarity rather than difficulty. It is not difficult. It is just you have never seen this in your life, and therefore you say that "Arey baap re, kya hai?" But there is nothing like "Arey baap re" once you have done practice. So read, work out, practice, try to convince yourself about all the mathematical points, and you will have a much better time doing physics if you do that. Now, let me replace this particular expression back over here. So let me again write down lambda dot is mj. If we give this back, if you give this back, this will become m transpose times dabba h by dabba lambda. Correct? Where did I arrive at all this from? Basically using the old Hamilton's equations and then little bit of manipulation. Barabar hai? Agreed? Yes, no? Quickly.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Now, I also know that what is lambda dot? This time let us use the new Hamilton's equations. Hamilton's equations in terms of the new variables. What is the expression for Hamilton's equation? This is just J times dabba H by dabba lambda. This is my fundamental definition or Hamilton's equation in matrix form. बराबर है? Correct? Yes, no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
If you compare these two equations, what do you see? Basically, you find that if the old Hamilton's equations are also satisfied and the new Hamilton's equations are also satisfied, if both are satisfied, then what is the condition which needs to be satisfied or which arises from here? Mj M transpose should be equal to J. This is basically the condition on the new set of variables and old set of variables. Basically, it's a condition on the Jacobian matrix. Basically, the condition says that the Jacobian matrix performs a similarity transformation on the J matrix. J matrix is 0, I minus I0, if you remember, and transforms it back to itself. Mane Mj M transpose is equal to J. So once I know the transformation, canonical transformation, or I know the new and old variables small qk and capital Qk, small pk and capital Pk, I can always construct the Jacobian matrix and check whether this condition is satisfied or not. If this condition is satisfied, that means that the choice of new variables capital Q, capital P is in accordance with a canonical transformation. In other words, capital Q by capital P will also satisfy Hamilton's equation for the new Hamiltonian. Okay. So this is basically the matrix condition for a transformation to be a canonical transformation. See, we keep yes, boliye.
Can you repeat this conditional?
How you read this equation in physical terms or what mathematical terms. That's what you are asking, ne? The Jacobian matrix performs a similarity transformation on the J matrix and transforms it back to itself. That is how I read this equation. Is that okay?
Okay, sir. Yes, sir.
It performs a similarity transformation and it transforms the matrix back to itself. J matrix back to J matrix. Okay. So this is the matrix condition for the transformation to be canonical. In other words, if I have a new set of variables capital Q, capital P, then I can just write down the Jacobian matrix and then do this kind of transformation on the J matrix and check whether I do get the J matrix back. If I do, then immediately it is clear that the transformation is canonical. Is that okay? That fine?
Yes, sir. Yes.
And if you are interested, you can check this out with the problem which we had done earlier on simple harmonic oscillator. You know capital Q, capital P, you know small q, small p. So you can easily construct the Jacobian matrix. And once you have constructed the Jacobian matrix, you can use that, operate it on the J matrix. J matrix in that case will be just a 2x2 matrix. Because you will just have 0, 1, minus 1, 0 as the J matrix. And so you can easily verify whether this kind of condition is satisfied. This is a additional homework which you can take. Okay. Just to get a feel that yes, this thing works. Okay. This is a matrix condition for the canonical transformation. For any transformation from small p to capital Q, capital P, in order for it to be labeled as a canonical transformation, this condition has to be satisfied. Once again, I keep saying this again and again because it needs to be emphasized. Basically, when we say a transformation is canonical, what we mean is that the new variables will satisfy Hamilton's equations of motion with the new Hamiltonian, which means that there could be a large variety of new variables capital Q, capital P, which actually don't satisfy Hamilton's equations. There could be a very large class of such functions. Some arbitrary combination of small q and small p, if we decide to call them as capital Q, capital P, that may or may not result in good capital Q, capital P, which will actually satisfy Hamilton's equation. If you need them to also satisfy Hamilton's equation, then they have to be special. They have to satisfy these conditions. For example, I can always say P is equal to sine Q and small q is equal to sine of capital Q and small p is cos of capital P. These are two functions. Nothing prevents me from saying that. But these two functions will give me a new Hamiltonian in terms of capital Q and capital P. But whether that new Hamiltonian with the new variables will satisfy Hamilton's equation is a big question mark. Okay. So any arbitrary function of Q's and P's need not necessarily obey Hamilton's equations at all. Only when the capital Q, capital P satisfy certain specific conditions, only then the new Hamiltonian will start making sense as a physical object, which will actually give you information about the system. Okay. It is possible to transform the old Hamiltonian to a useless function. It is possible to break down the entire system of Hamiltonian dynamics. And basically, these conditions on canonical transformation basically tells us what is the way to go from one Hamiltonian to a new Hamiltonian without breaking the whole machinery of Hamiltonian dynamics. That is the basic idea here. Okay. I hope that puts a bit of perspective on things. To conclude for today, let us do one more thing and then we will stop. The one more thing is to correlate what we had done earlier, that is the generating function type of approach to canonical transformation, and this one, the matrix type of approach, and try to see how one can try to see whether both can be similar to each other or both can be related to each other. Okay? That is our next stop, and then we will conclude for today. Basically, the what we are looking for is a connection between the generating function approach to canonical transformation and the matrix approach to canonical transformation. What we had seen earlier, and till now there seems to be no connection between these two. Na? We started by saying action integral if we transform and if we insist that both the old and new variables should satisfy the same action principle, then I have this arbitrary additional function capital F, and then by different choices of capital F I can do different things, achieve different transformations. This was one side of the story. Other side which we saw today or just now in this session is that if I expand and if I insist on both the conditions to be both old and new coordinates should satisfy Hamilton's equation, then I end up with a certain set of conditions either in matrix form or in differential form, and we have not really established how these two things are correlated with each other. That is what we'll attempt to do now. And for doing this, what we will consider is something called an infinitesimal canonical transformation. Short form ICT, infinitesimal canonical transformation. Basically consider an F2 type function which is basically just, if you remember, F2 type functions are functions of new momenta and old coordinates. It is summation k qk p qk pk small q small k and p capital K plus epsilon times some other function g. This epsilon is very, very small. Okay. Now just try to see what happens when epsilon is equal to 0. If epsilon is equal to 0, you can look up the formulas. Basically, Qi is daba F2 by daba Pi, and Pi is, let me write K, na? Why use I and confuse ourselves with dots? Qk. What will be daba F2 by daba Pk? It will just be Qk. And what will be daba F2 by daba small qk? It will be Pk. This tells you that the new coordinate is same as the old coordinate and the old momentum is same as the new momentum. Which means basically you have generated what is called an identity transformation. Or you have left the system unchanged. Identity transformation is just a fancy way of saying I did not change anything. Okay?
सर
Yes.
तिथे जी लिहिलाय कॅपिटल जी चा मिनिंग काय आहे?
कॅपिटल जे आणखी एक फंक्शन आहे. आणि त्याबद्दल आपल्याला माहिती असण्याची गरजच नाहीये, ते आता येईल.
Okay, sir.
Even if we don't know what is G, it doesn't matter. And what is G is very interesting. We'll come to it later on after maybe one more session, after doing collecting a few more tools. And at that time, it will be very interesting. Right now, G is some arbitrary function. Okay. And I have put epsilon equal to 0. So anyway, this part disappears. So basically, without the epsilon part, if I take only this part, summation k qk into capital Pk, what I generate is something called the identity transformation, which means basically system is unchanged. Correct. So if epsilon is non-zero but very small, what I will be achieving using this F2 type of generating function is I will generate a very small change in the coordinates and momentum. Is this okay? Basically, what I am trying to achieve is shift the coordinates and momenta very, very slightly. This makes much more sense if you look at it from active viewpoint of canonical transformation. Means I am just changing the state of the system from QP to Q plus delta Q and P plus delta P. In fact, we will write it down explicitly in that format. Okay. What will be, if epsilon is non-zero, then what will be QK? Quickly. Expression for QK is daba F2 by daba capital PK, which gives you, of course, QK plus epsilon times daba G by daba PK. Agreed?
Yes, sir.
And similarly, if you write down the expression for Pk, which will be daba F2 by daba Qk, we will find that this is Pk plus epsilon times now if you pursue this further, basically delta Qk, which is the new variable minus the old variable, will be equal to plus epsilon daba G by daba capital Pk, and which I am going to approximately write as plus epsilon times daba G by daba small pk. This approximation is basically because capital P and small p are almost the same. They differ only by a very small amount. And similarly, I am going to write delta pk, which is capital Pk minus small pk, which will be minus epsilon daba G by daba Qk. Is this okay? The change in the variables is related to it's proportional to epsilon and related to the derivatives of the G function. You can combine these two together and watch this very closely. Basically, what you get is delta eta is equal to epsilon J matrix times daba G by daba eta. You can see that this is the same kind of correlation as Hamilton's equations of motion. Delta Qk is proportional to positive derivative with respect to Pk, and delta Pk is proportional to negative derivative with respect to Qk. So this is the same cross correlation which you had in Hamilton's equations of motion, and we know that that cross correlation basically captured very nicely by the J matrix. So I can write down summarize this whole thing by saying that basically the delta eta column vector is equal to epsilon J times daba G by daba eta column vector. J is a square matrix as usual. Epsilon is just a number. Okay. Therefore, when I talk about the transformation from the lambdas to the etas normally how are lambda and eta related to each other? Or how are the change in lambda and change in eta related to each other? They are related to each other via the Jacobian matrix, basically. Since lambda is eta plus delta eta, this tells me that what will happen to the Jacobian matrix? Jacobian matrix will be the matrix containing dabba lambda by dabba eta, which is basically dabba by dabba eta of eta plus delta eta, which will be dabba eta by dabba eta will just give you an identity matrix, and dabba by dabba eta of delta eta will give you basically an additional derivative in the dabba g by dabba eta matrix. Basically, this is a square matrix now, which has general entries dabba square b g by dabba eta I dabba eta. So basically, the Jacobian matrix can be written as identity matrix plus a small number times the J matrix times another square matrix given by dabba square G by dabba eta I dabba eta J. This is what we have. Okay. And if you now try to ask the question, what will be M transpose, what will you get? M transpose will be basically I transpose plus epsilon times dabba square G by dabba eta transpose J transpose. You know that matrix multiplication is not commutative. When you take a transpose, the order of the matrices gets reversed. That is what we have written over here. Now, looking at the structure of the G matrix, the dabba square G by dabba eta I dabba eta J, if I interchange eta I and eta J, nothing is happening to this matrix. So the transpose of the identity matrix is, of course, the identity matrix itself. The transpose of the G matrix is the same. So dabba square G by dabba eta will remain same. Let me write this more clearly. And let me write it here. So the transpose matrix will be, transpose of identity matrix is the same as the identity matrix. Transpose of the G matrix is same as the G matrix, dabba square G by dabba eta. What is the transpose of the J matrix? If you look at the J matrix, it is defined as a null matrix, an identity matrix, a minus identity matrix, and a null matrix. The transpose of this is basically interchange of the off diagonal terms will give you this, which is basically minus times the J matrix. So the transpose of the J matrix is just minus of the J matrix, which means that this term will become something of this kind. Okay. This was a inset, so let us box it out so that we don't bring it into our considerations. Now let us examine the condition for canonical transformation. Let us examine what happens when we do MJ M transpose. What is MJ M transpose? M is identity plus epsilon J Actually, let us do this. Basically, you have this. Expand all the brackets. The first term will be I times j times I, which is just j. The second term will be epsilon j d square g by d eta into j into I. So that is plus epsilon j into the big matrix, which I am not writing explicitly, into j. Another term in the expansion will be identity matrix into j into this minus thing. So basically you get minus epsilon j into the big matrix into j, plus there will be a minus epsilon square times various things. And out of these, as you can see, the second and third term will cancel because they are opposite and equal. The fourth term we neglect because epsilon is already a small quantity, so epsilon square will be 0. And therefore, you end up with the condition that mj m transpose is equal to j. Which means that the transformation generated by your generating function, F2 type generating function, is a canonical transformation. So all infinitesimal transformations of this kind are canonical transformation. That is what this demonstrates. And later on, we will come to the idea of how to generate a transformation by larger amount, a finite transformation. It can be thought of as a series of infinitesimal transformations, and hence any amount of transformations which you do with a generating function will always be canonical. So basically, we have kind of brought both of our approaches together by saying that I start with a generating function type of approach, and then I demonstrate using the matrix approach that yes, this transformation is a canonical transformation, which kind of brings you into the confidence that whatever I have done with the differential conditions or the matrix conditions and whatever I have done with the generating functions, both of them are converging to the same point, that this is giving me a methodology or a method to obtain a canonical transformation of the variables. Okay. This is basically what I wanted to do in this session. Basically, where we have reached is the following, that we now know that we have to be careful in choosing our generalized new coordinates and momenta, because any transformation from old coordinates and momenta to new coordinates and momenta will not necessarily give me a good result. Mane, the new coordinates and momenta may or may not satisfy Hamilton's equations of motion. Unlike in the Lagrangian case, any transformation of the coordinates will always satisfy the new coordinates, and the new Lagrangian will always satisfy Lagrange equations of motion. We never had this trouble. With the Hamiltonian, we do have. So we have to be a little careful. This trouble is induced by reducing the problem to 2n number of independent generalized variables, that is the coordinates and the momenta. When momenta are involved, it is no longer simple to do a transformation. We have come up with a systematic procedure to do the transformation. We said that we can use 4 types of generating functions to generate different types of transformations. And if we don't start with a generating function, if we just want to randomly check some useful type of variable to see whether this guy will give me a canonical transformation or not, then I can do that as well using either the differential conditions or the matrix condition. We can check if a particular choice of capital Q and capital P is taken up, whether the transformation happens to be a canonical one or not. That can be determined using those conditions. And finally, these two very different looking approaches, the generating function approach and the matrix approach, we have demonstrated that both of them are actually the same. And when I start with a generating function, I do get a transformation which is a canonical transformation according to the matrix condition. And since this is true for an infinitesimal transformation, I can build up a large number of such infinitesimal steps to make a finite transformation, and even that will also be a canonical transformation only. So basically, anything generated by any type of generating function will always be a canonical transformation within this framework. And we have basically understood all of these aspects of this particular domain of canonical transformations. This is the basic summary of what we have achieved. Next time, what we will do is try to simplify things further. According to me, simplify. You may feel it is complicating things. Difference in perspective. But basically, next time we will try to reduce the equations of classical mechanics into a very compact and elegant form, which basically gives you very deep insight into the fact that the same equations will be valid even for quantum mechanics, even for statistical mechanics. Basically, you get the feeling of reaching somewhere near to the root from where all these different branches of mechanics have risen. That is what we will do next time. Okay. Thank you very much. I will stop here. If there are any questions now, please ask and we'll take those for discussion. Thank you.